Today, we are going to address the key questions that we receive from asset managers. Does the new ESG Ratings Regulation apply to you if you use proprietary ESG methodologies in your investment process?
As usual, the answer is that it depends, but in most cases, it's unlikely. The ESG rating regulations entered into force in January 2025 and will apply from July 2026. Its objective is to enhance transparency and integrity in the ESG ratings market by addressing a gap relating to commercial ESG rating providers such as MSCI, Sustainalytics, or Refinitiv. The EU Commission clarified in the preparatory works that the regulation is not intended to capture in-house ESG ratings developed by asset managers for internal investment decisions, as they are already regulated under AIFMD, UCITS, MiFID, and fiduciary duties. So why the uncertainty?
Well, it's because the legal definitions are very broad. An ESG rating is defined as essentially any opinion or score based on a methodology. This means that proprietary ESG scoring systems could technically fall within the scope. An ESG rating provider is also defined quite broadly as a legal person whose activities include the issuance, publication, or distribution of ESG ratings on a professional basis. The wording suggests that the regulation targets entities whose primary business is to provide ESG ratings, and therefore that internal investment tools should fall outside of the scope. However, the interpretation is not entirely certain, as Rocco will explain in a moment. Importantly, the regulation also contains some carve-outs. Mandatory SFDR disclosures in fund documentation, such as Article 8 or Article 9 disclosures, and periodic reports, are explicitly excluded. So there is no obligation under this regulation for those contexts. The real question is, what happens when firms go beyond mandatory SFDR content, particularly, for example, in marketing materials?
Here, the uncertainty in interpretation stems from the key distinction between describing a methodology and publishing ESG ratings. If you explain that ESG factors are integrated into your investment process and describe your proprietary framework without publishing a specific ratings or fund-level ESG scores, you can reasonably argue that you are not issuing an ESG rating, but simply outlining your investment approach. However, if you publish aggregated ESG scores, for example, this fund has an ESG rating of X out of 10, you are much closer to triggering the regulation. In this case, disclosure obligations would likely apply, including detailed information published on the website and hyperlinks in communication. However, registration as an ESG rating provider would generally not be necessary. So what should asset managers do now?
First, I would say map where ESG ratings or ESG scores appear in your documentation and communications. Distinguish clearly between purely mandatory SFDR disclosures, marketing materials, and internal processes. Second, assess whether publishing fund-level ESG scores are really necessary, or whether describing your ESG integration approach would achieve the same objective without creating the regulatory exposure. Third, for international groups, carefully review internal arrangement to ensure ESG-related services are not inadvertently captured, which would be the case, for example, when you attach a separate remuneration stream to the provision of ESG ratings. The framework is still evolving and further guidance may appear, but until then, firms should base their assessment on the current position. At our end, we do support asset managers in evaluating the specific situation and implementing tailored compliance solutions. If you would like to discuss how we can help, do not hesitate to get in touch. Thank you for watching.